I teach Buddhism and introductions to Buddhism at Rice, and here I like to merge that kind of introduction with an orientation to also the kind of practice that we will do at 11 o'clock. You're welcome to stay for that, and I'll say then a little more about how some of the background of Buddhism that you may have learned already and that we're talking about today is actually comes alive and becomes actually a possibility for experience in one's own life through the practice that we do at 11. So where did Buddhism start? Who is the Buddha? What happened? You're pointing to somebody who knows? Huh? India, indeed. The Holy Land of India, Bharat. Tibetans still refer to India as the Holy Land. The one that we now call Buddha was born in Lumbini Gardens, which today is just inside the Nepali border. It's part of the pilgrimage sites for Buddhists. And he arose, he was born, he taught, he was part of a very important cultural movement that had been going on before his birth and which he really pushed forward in a certain way. What was going on in India at that time, things were a little prosperous right then, and the long held art of ritual practice, which was very central to many of the Indian religions. We call them Hinduism, but there are actually many different, very rich traditions within India already at the time of the Buddha, about 500 years before the time of Christ. And what was happening was that there was a great emphasis, there had for centuries been a great emphasis in India of, oh, maybe you needed good weather for your crops. Maybe you needed wealth. Maybe you had sickness. So in India, they did what people all over the world have always and continue to do. They prayed. And they prayed in very beautiful, elaborate, performative rituals, which were so complicated, they had to be conducted by people who had trained in those rituals. An ordinary person, they might pray in their own way, but they couldn't do these very special kinds of performances, really, sometimes going on for days with incantations and incense and flowers. It's still done today in India. Very beautiful, very powerful. And these were done to propitiate the deities of whom there were many in the Hindu tradition, who had certain power. So you would ask a particular powerful figure like Agni or Vishnu and say, please help me. Or actually, you would ask the trained ritualists, the Brahmins, to do those rituals for you. So ritual life was very strong in India. It's still very strong. It's strong in all the Buddhist traditions. But there came to be a movement called the Shramana, or Wanderers movement. People felt, I don't know about having other people do these rituals. I feel like I want to go out into the jungle, into the forest, and explore my own experience. I think there's some wisdom to be had by paying attention to me, not me in the ordinary way, but looking deeply into my mind, looking into what's really going on in life. What's it all about? What's meaningful? What is a meaningful life? So these questions were very powerful already in India. And maybe the people who today found billion-dollar startups or become great scholars or doctors or creative geniuses. In other words, the creme de la creme, the very creative, interesting people of that time, that's what they were doing. They were leaving home. They were going to wander so they wouldn't be encumbered by ordinary life, and they could look into their own hearts, minds, the eye of the universe, you might say. They were doing meditation. They were doing yoga meditation. Yoga goes back millennia in India. It didn't just start with Buddhism. Sitting like this didn't just start with Buddhism. It was already there in India. So the young Shakyamuni, as he was called, the sage of the Shakyas, the one that we now call a Buddha, was born as a prince in a clan, the Shakya clan in central India. And gradually, he also became interested in exploring what he could find out if he really devoted himself to ascetic practices. Now, he was in this way following the customs of his country, but he was also a rebel, because traditionally in India you didn't go out into wandering until you had fulfilled your secular duties, which was to marry, well, to get educated, if you were a man, to get educated, to marry, to have a child, and when you had your first grandson, then you were free. And then you might go out and wander. So Buddha didn't wait that long. His own son had just been born, and when he saw a corpse carried through the streets of his town, as is the Indian custom, he had never seen this, because his father said, keep him away from all suffering, otherwise he might decide to become a yogic practitioner. We don't want him to do that. We want him to fulfill his role as a great king. That's what my son should be, a great king. Do your parents say things like that? You know, you should do something really important. So he had never seen a corpse, a dead body. And when he did, it just upended his understanding of life and life's purpose. He was being taken in a chariot. Let's say his chauffeur was driving him. His chauffeur was a very wise person. And he said, What is this? And he was told, this is death. This comes to everyone. What? Even me? I'm a king's son. I'm going to die too? Which is a kind of echo of how I think most of us feel. Yes, we know about death, but that happens to other people. Do you notice that you feel that way? It's very hard not to feel that way. Intellectually, it's very easy. But emotionally, it's quite difficult, especially when you're young. Especially when you're young. I know, I tried to meditate on impermanence when I wasn't that much older than you. It's hard to get. So Buddha felt, he concluded that since he was going to die, and he didn't know when, which none of us do, he better get out and practice right away. So that was his first radical move. He left home. His wife and children were well cared for. In India, you have an extended family. He had servants. But he left. And he practiced for 7 years, we are told. And finally, he sat down under what we now call the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, outside of Gaya, not so far from Patna in India, in the state of Bihar. And he had an experience. He had an awakening. He woke up from the sleep of ordinary experience, humdrum, same old, same old. Now this awakening is how we understand the word Bud. Bud is a root of the Sanskrit word Buddha, so he is a Buddha, one who has awakened. Sometimes it's translated as enlightenment. But I like the word awakened because it's experience near. You all know what it is to wake up. Right? We wake up every morning. So if we just hang here for a moment and reflect, what does it mean to wake up in your own experience? We have a sense of what it means, right? It's a shift. We were asleep, and now we're waking up. What would you say? How would you describe that shift? What happens? It's not esoteric, right? You wake up. You're maybe in a light sleep on a train, on a plane, and you wake up. What happens? Something floods in, and something floods in from what is actually around you, right? You said, oh, I'm in a train, or oh, it's morning, or oh, I'm in the hospital. You realize, oh, you locate yourself very quickly, right? In time, in space, and yeah, beautiful, things flood in. Oh, I'm here. I'm not in, I'm not running through the streets, being chased by a bear. Phew. I thought that was happening, right? We wake up, so there's a kind of clarity. Things can come into us because our mind, instead of being dull, so in sleep, generally, either we're kind of closed off from what is ever going around us, dull, that changes, or we might be very vitally engaged in a dream. We marry, we have children, we get rich, we lose a fortune, we end up having to take an exam that we've never studied for. Who hasn't had that dream? Some version of that dream, right? And then we wake up and go, oh my goodness, that's not true. That didn't happen. So for Buddha, this awakening was much of the same, but of a different order. He woke up. He had a vision. He saw, as he describes it later, beings dying and being born. Dying and being born in accordance with actually actions they themselves had done in the past. So you may have heard about karma. Did you hear about karma in your courses? Karma? What does karma mean? The word? Or you never come back if I keep asking you questions. Huh? You know what it means? Kind of, yes. It means karma. It means action. It means doing. And it is sometimes. So work creates karma, and it's also the result of karma. Good. So the universe has a certain order, but perhaps the most important thing to mention that Buddha noticed is that things are always changing. Always changing. And he saw one thing that he woke up from, so we can spend much time discussing what illusions he woke up from, but one was he woke up from the illusion of same, steady, steady, or as the Buddhists technically call it, permanence. He saw that things are always changing, and he didn't just know this intellectually. He could feel it. He saw it. He had visions of time going by, things arising and ceasing over and over and over and over again. Our science would totally agree, right? Stars arise, they go away also. The sun will not be here forever. So he woke up from that, and therefore he's called the Buddha, the awakened one. And he awakened to what he felt was a very profound and important reality that he had been asleep to before. And this reality was, one, things were always changing. Two, we didn't like that. We wanted to hold on to things as they are, at least when they're going our way. Or if they're not going our way, we want to change them in the direction that we like. So could distill all of those reactions that we have to our being kind of hopelessly enmeshed with hope or fear. Hope, wanting something to happen in the future. Fear, that something else would happen in the future. Can kind of coalesce all of our distractions, which we notice quite clearly when we seek to meditate. They're mostly about, what can I do? What can I do better? I hope this doesn't happen. I'm going to try to do this. I don't know if it will succeed. Does that sound familiar? It's just normal. So Buddha was really trying to describe a situation that we know very well. It's not only Buddhists for whom things change, right? This is a fundamental principle. Hi, there's cushions if you're comfortable on them there. There's one chair over there and a chair back there too. Okay, if you're comfortable on the cushion, you're welcome there. Yeah. So he understood through the visions and experience that he had that the way things are is different from the way they seem. Things seem kind of stable, usually. But even when we're sitting quietly, you know, you're breathing, your body is changing. Everything is changing. You yourself have changed a great deal in the last few years. You look at it, especially you were still in high school, right? You look at a picture of yourself 5, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, unrecognizable. Who is that person? But he or she has the same name you have. Well, that's interesting. When you say my name is, generally we have a sense of, me. I'm always me. That doesn't change. When I was 3, I did this. When I was 6, I did this. Now I'm in high school, I do this. But who's the you? The you that's in high school wasn't there when you were 3. And that 3-year-old, where are they? It's been a stream. You are a river. We are all rivers, moving, changing, going to the ocean of our vastness. So Buddha understood that things were not what they seem, and that we actually suffer a lot because we live in hope and fear in a completely unreal context. So he felt that this would be something to share with others. He wasn't thinking of starting a new religion. It wasn't until later that we started to call what he taught Buddhism. I think there's some spaces over here. Yeah? You can bring in a chair also from the other room if you like. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Things are... Thank you. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Things are not what they seem. That is an essential principle which we can look at in rich ways. Things are not what they seem. You think you are a you, but where, how, who is that? We won't talk about that too much today, just introducing a drop that we will expand on another time. So he wanted to share this information. He thought it would be helpful to people. He thought it would be helpful. And the Buddha, we are told, when he was born, walked out of his mother's side, causing her no pain, in the garden of Lumbini, and he took 7 steps, and he said, I am here for the benefit of the world. I am here for the good of the world. In other words, I'm here to help. I'm here to help out any way that I can. And this is a core principle in Buddhist traditions, and really I think in all spiritual traditions, to be of service, to offer something to the world, to others, to your family, to strangers. So having come into the world with this intention, and now with this realization, we all need to wake up. That's a second principle. We are asleep. We don't realize that things are different from the way they appear. Like the rear view mirror thing, objects may be closer than they appear. Things may be a lot less real than they appear. And he also realized, he sat under this tree for 49 more days, wondering if people would understand what he had to say, because he was basically saying that all of your experience is, mistaken. And if you want to wake up, it's going to be a big change, and a wonderful change. But would anyone want to listen to him? Would anyone understand? And he reflected, and this became a crucial topic later when he began to teach, that everyone has the capacity to understand that things are not what they seem. And everyone has the capacity to become liberated from the false views that imprison us into cages of reactivity, of hope, fear, desire, hatred, ignorance. Maybe you've learned those. These are, for Buddhists, the 3 main things that chain us to same old, and prevent us from waking up. And sometimes they add pride and jealousy. But all of these are equally ways of hoping and fearing. So Buddha was only in his early 30s when he had this realization. He lived until 80, and he spent the rest of his life walking around India, Benares, Rajgir, Srinagar, where he died, these now pilgrimage places in India, teaching. And after he died, he said, I've taught you the way. Your liberation depends on you. In other words, I don't have to hang around anymore. I'm done. I've said it all. You just take it seriously. So his students wanted to gather together and recite what he had taught, because it wasn't written down. So they wanted to reflect on what Buddha had said so that it could be remembered. Sacred things in India were memorized, placed in the heart. They weren't written down. That was for priceless of goods, not sacred things. Sacred things you put in your heart and you memorize. So they said, well, what should we do? We must invite Ananda. Ananda was Buddha's cousin and had been to all of the teachings of the Buddha. And so he was the one who had to come to this gathering because he had heard everything. But there was a problem, bless you. In order to gain admittance to this particular meeting, you had to be an arhat. You had to have overcome the Ari, the enemies of desire, hatred, ignorance. You had to hunt, conquer them. So that's one etymology of arhat, a Sanskrit word meaning somebody who's liberated, somebody who's free. So Buddha was liberated, he was free, he had woken up, he had broken the prison ranks, and he had written down how to get there. So Ananda needed to be present. But Ananda, he'd been so busy serving the Buddha, he was not an arhat. Big problem. So Ananda, and I tell this story as it was told by Goenkaji, who taught for many years in India and the West, insight meditation. So Ananda goes off, he gives himself 2 weeks to become an arhat. Okay. That's a lot of pressure, right? You think studying for an exam is bad? The whole future of the tradition depended on him becoming an arhat so he could attend this meeting. So he meditates day and night, day and night. It's just not happening. A week goes by. Okay, got a few more days. Let me see. You can imagine that there is a lot of distraction of hope. Maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight, maybe at dawn. And fear, maybe it won't work. Maybe I won't be able to go to this meeting. Hope and fear, hope and fear. He sits and he sits and he sits and he... It's the night before. It's his last night. Oh my goodness. He sits and he sits and he sits and he's... And finally, he looks into his mind freshly, without hope or fear, and he says, I'm not an arhat. I'm just not. As soon as he puts his head down on the pillow, he has woken up. His ability to recognize and see the very thing that he was trying to get rid of and escape from and really to deny. We do this too, right? I'm not a procrastinator, we say. But when we actually see, oh, but I'm having to pull an all-nighter now because I didn't start my paper and I'm a procrastinator and it's causing me pain. Oh, then you could change, right? So Ananda, by being in the moment, paying attention, fueled by his tremendously compassionate urgency to be an arhat, but letting go of all judgment, not projecting anything onto his identity, just, I'm not an arhat. He wakes up. He wakes up into the reality of what he is, which is a liberated being, which, as Buddha extensively discusses, and many commentaries since then, is what everybody is, really. So he was finally in touch with his real nature. Not being an arhat was not his real nature either. It was just a description of that moment. Now, so he did go to the meeting, and this was the beginning of compiling the collection, the first collection of Buddhist teaching, known as the Tripitaka. Tripitaka, it's kind of a nice tripping off your tongue word, Tripitaka. Means the 3 baskets or the 3 collections. And the practice that we do here, which we'll do in a few minutes, we'll have a few minutes pause first, actually, and I'll say this in about 5 minutes as we begin the next session, distills the very essence of the teachings in those 3 sections of the 3 collections, the Tripitaka of attention or concentration, good, kind behavior, and insightful wisdom. All of that just in our simple practice, as it was there also for Ananda. I'm going to break the rules a little bit, just for a moment, to see, you high school students, if you have a question or a comment. And there's a microphone. And those of you who might have a question but you don't feel like speaking it out now, do you have a piece of paper with you? We could find some. You could write it down, and I'll look at it in the next few minutes, and if possible, address it. Anyone want to ask a question? Okay. Wait, but yeah, you have to speak in the microphone. Wait.
So when you use a microphone, hold it like this, because it doesn't have a
Thank
I'm
you.
actually one of the teachers, but I'm kind of a novice as far as Buddhism goes too. So my question is, can you talk a bit more about some of the philosophical or theological differences that the Buddha came to that differed from Hinduism? Like some of the ideas that diverged his teachings from the older teachings of Hinduism?
Okay, I'll save that for, I plan to speak anyway for a few minutes once we start, so I'll speak to that a little bit. It's a great issue. Can't be solved in 2 minutes, but yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so remember, the Tripitaka has to do with concentration, good behavior or ethics, and wisdom. Okay, you can take that away. And now you know about Ananda and his process. And you know that one thing that Buddha did differently from Hinduism was he said, don't wait till you're a grandparent, start early. That was actually a radical change in the traditional life of a upper educated Hindu family. And one of the things he also did was say that everyone that the caste system, as it was in that time, the hierarchy, the priests were the highest, and he said, you are a Brahmin, a high caste person, not by the family of your birth, but by your internal qualities. So that was a big shift. And so it went from a value system that valued kind of, status, social status into which you were born, to a value system that honored qualities that you could develop and that anyone could develop. So that's one thing. Okay, if you have a question, you can find some paper and write it down, and we'll see if there's time. Or you could come another time. Okay, so just relax. If you want to stand up and stretch, and we'll start the meditation with a little bit of talk again in 3 minutes.